Welcome to the pre-application information session for the fiscal year 2022 Grants to Engage Men and Boys as Allies in the Prevention of Violence Against Women and Girls program, also referred to as the EM program solicitation. The Office on Violence Against Women, also referred to as OVW, is hosting this webinar to go over the FY22 solicitation for the EM program. My name is Kelly Green, and I am the program specialist assigned to the EM program. The purpose of the pre-application information session is to highlight a few key points in the solicitation. However, it is not the intent, nor is there sufficient time to go over every aspect of the solicitation. All applicants are responsible for reading the FY22 EM solicitation and the OVW solicitation companion guide to ensure a complete application is submitted. Before we get started, you may find it helpful to have the EM solicitation in front of you for a point of reference during this information session. Please note the EM solicitation is one of two solicitations issued under the Consolidated Youth and Engaging Men Grant Program, also referred to as the CYEM program. The other solicitation is focused on serving children and youth impacted by domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, stalking, and sex trafficking. This information session focuses solely on the Engaging Men solicitation. If you are interested in submitting an application for children and youth, please view the information session specifically for that solicitation. Next, I'm going to go over the registration and submission information. And one of the biggest changes to the submission process this year is the time that the applications must be submitted by on the due date. Applications are due by 9 p.m. Eastern Time on Monday, April 11th, 2022. OVW will not accept late submissions except under limited circumstances as described in the OVW policy on late submissions and other submission requirements section of the solicitation, which is on pages 21 and 22 of the solicitation. In addition to the application due date, there are other important steps and deadlines that affect your ability to submit an application. First, every applicant must obtain a Data Universal Number System number, commonly known as a DUNS number, and register online with the System for Award Management, commonly known as SAM, and grants.gov. Obtaining a DUNS number and the registration process can take several days and must be completed before applicants are eligible to submit an application in JustGrants. For this reason, OVW strongly encourages applicants to start this process as early as possible. We have provided some dates to assist you with the planning. Apply for your DUNS number by March 14th, 2022. Register with SAM also by March 14th, 2022. And register with grants.gov by April 6, 2022. Every year, applications are rejected during the submission process because the applicant's DUNS number and/or registration with SAM have expired, or the applicant did not begin the registration process early enough. At the conclusion of this webinar, it is recommended that you start this process if you have not already done so. Applicants that currently have a DUNS number and are registered with SAM and grants.gov should check their status within those systems to ensure that they are current and have not expired. It is highly recommended that you read over the submission process beginning on page 20 of the solicitation. Applicants are strongly encouraged to review the entire solicitation, including the links, as early as possible to ensure you allow sufficient time to not only prepare the application, but to also complete the submission process by April 11th, 2022. When ready to apply, applicants may find this funding opportunity on grants.gov using the CFDA number, which is 16.888, the grants.gov opportunity number, which is O-OVW-2022-171085, or the title of the solicitation, all of which can be found on the cover page of the solicitation. The FY 2022 application submission process is a multi-step process and involves multiple systems. Application materials will be submitted in both grants.gov and JustGrants. And we strongly encourage starting the application process as early as possible to allow time to learn the system and the process. To begin the submission process, applicants will first submit the application for federal assistance, otherwise known as the SF-424, and the disclosure of lobbying activities forms, also known as SFLLL, in grants.gov. After submitting these forms in grants.gov, the applicant will receive an email notification from the JustGrants system, also known as JustGrants, which is the grant management system, to complete the remainder of the application in JustGrants. If the applicant is a new user in JustGrants, the email will also include instructions on registering with JustGrants. Remember, you will not be able to submit an application until you have obtained a DUNS number, are registered with SAM and grants.gov, and have submitted the SF-424 and SFLLL in grants.gov. All of these steps must be done before JustGrants will generate an email for you to complete and submit your CY application in JustGrants. If you have applied for OVW funding in prior years, you will notice significant changes in the application process this year. In the new JustGrants system, applicants will directly enter some portions of the application in text boxes, fill out web-based forms for other portions of the application, and upload documents as attachments. The following major elements of the application are examples of how applicants will submit information in JustGrants. The data requested with application, otherwise known as the DRA, is now a survey that is completed in JustGrants. The proposal abstract will be entered in a text box. The proposal narrative will be uploaded as an attachment in JustGrants. The budget worksheet and the budget narrative will be entered into a web-based form directly in JustGrants. Attachments will not be accepted for the budget and budget narrative, so be certain to fill out the web-based form in JustGrants. And the Memorandum of Understanding will be uploaded as an attachment. In addition to these major elements, other documentation will be required for all applications or when applicable. Read the EM solicitation carefully for the full description of all of the required items for the EM program. And additional information related to the submission process can be found on pages 20 through 22 of the solicitation. JustGrants has developed tools to assist applicants with submitting an application. To assist these tools, you can visit the JustGrants website. And then once on their website, you click on the training tab and choose application submission from the drop-down box. The grant award period is for 36 months, tentatively beginning on October 1st, 2022, and ending on September 30th, 2025. Applicants should submit applications with project activities and budgets that reflect this period. Applicants may request up to $350,000. OVW anticipates notifying all applicants of the funding decisions by October 1st, 2022. And for more information on the award period amount and notification, you can see page 8 of the solicitation. Both new and continuation applications are accepted. New applications are those that have never received funding under the Consolidated Grant Program to address children and youth experiencing domestic and sexual assault and engage men and boys as allies, otherwise known as the CYEM program, or whose funding under the CYEM program expired on or before April 11th, 2021. Continuation applications are those that have an existing or recently closed CYEM grant after April 11th, 2021. And applicants may apply to both the CY and EM solicitations. Current grantees with 50% or more of unobligated funds remaining as of March 31st, 2022 may not be considered for funding, or if selected for funding may receive a reduced amount of funding in FY22 and or a shorter award period. And for more information, refer to page 9 of the solicitation. Next, we're going to cover eligibility. Eligibility is mentioned on the cover of the solicitation as well as on page 10. Eligible applicants are nonprofits, non-governmental entities, tribal organizations, Indian tribal governments, units of local government, and agencies of a unit of local government. Foreign entities and programs and institutions of higher education are not eligible for funding under the CY program. Recipients and partners or subrecipients of the CYEM funding in FY20 or 21 are not eligible to apply as the lead applicant or as a partner or subrecipient on an FY22 EM application. Applications submitted by ineligible entities or that do not meet the program requirements may not be considered for funding. Now that we've covered the process for submitting an application and reviewed the types of applications that can be submitted and the eligibility requirements, let's jump into developing your proposed project. Each year, OVW identifies specific topics or issues related to domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking that the office will focus attention. Applicants may choose to incorporate one or more of the priority areas into their proposal. Applicants proposing projects to address a priority area may be given special consideration during the recommendation process. What that means is that OVW has the discretion to recommend a lower scoring application for funding if it meaningfully addresses one or more of the priority areas. Please note that applicants are not required to address a priority area. It is completely optional. A common mistake that we see in applications that claim to address a priority area is that they do not include all of the requirements of the priority area in the proposal narrative, which results in a lower score during peer review. So if you do choose to include one or more of the priority areas in your proposed project, be certain that you have reviewed the requirements for each and that your proposal narrative and budget clearly include the activities and strategies to fully address that specific priority area. This year, the OVW priority areas are advance racial equity as an essential component of ending sexual assault, domestic violence, dating violence, stalking, and sex trafficking. To qualify for this priority area, applicants must partner with culturally specific, community-based organizations or programs if they are not the applicant, and include project activities that specifically engage and promote culturally specific communities. The other priority area is to improve outreach, services, civil and criminal justice responses, prevention, and support for survivors of sexual assault, domestic violence, dating violence, stalking, and sex trafficking. To qualify for this priority area, applicants must partner with and meaningfully compensate population-specific organizations or programs, if not the applicant, that are by and for the underserved community served by the proposed project. Compensation for the partners must be at least 10% or more of the requested funding and provide for the salaries, travel, training and staff development, and general operating expenses such as rent, utilities, supplies, business insurance, and financial audits. Please refer to pages 6 and 7 for more information, including the definition of culturally specific and population-specific organization. To close out this section, do not state you will address a priority area thinking it will give you additional consideration for funding unless your proposed project meaningfully supports the priority area. It can actually hurt your overall score by causing you to lose valuable points if you do not include enough information in your proposal narrative to convey exactly how you will address the priority area. Remember, points may be deducted during peer review and or during programmatic review if the applicant states on the data requested with the application survey that a specific priority area will be addressed and the proposal narrative, budget, and the budget narrative and the MOU do not include sufficient activities and or information to support that priority area. Now let's shift our focus to the EM program. The EM program supports projects that create educational programming and community organizing to encourage men and boys to work as allies with women and girls to prevent domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, stalking, and sex trafficking. With the EM program, there are 3 purpose areas which applicants may choose one or more to focus their work. The purpose areas for the Engaging Men program can be found on page 6 of the solicitation. Applicants may select one or more of the purpose areas to address in the proposed project. The activities described in the proposal narrative and the budget should be reflective of the selected purpose areas. Funds under this program may be used to address one or more of the following purpose areas. Purpose Area 1, develop and/or implement programming to recruit and train men and boys to serve as role models, positive influencers, change agents, and/or mentors to address and prevent domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, stalking, or sex trafficking. Purpose Area 2, integrate education on domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, stalking, or sex trafficking, otherwise known as the VAWA crimes, into established support and/or enrichment programs to assist men or boys in developing healthy relationships, challenging social norms that support violence against women and girls, becoming active bystanders, and understanding the intersection of the VAWA crimes and other types of violence. For Purpose Area 3, applicants will need to develop and implement a Train the Trainer program for community organizations or programs or governmental agencies or programs to incorporate education and training into their existing work with male clients to prevent violence against women and girls. Before moving on, I want to provide you with a few helpful hints to assist you in submitting a strong application. First, applicants must choose at least one purpose area to address in their project. Applicants choosing more than one should ensure their proposed project fully addresses the requirements for each purpose area chosen. A common mistake I see with applications for the Engaging Men program are projects that are focused on primary prevention education. While this is important, the focus of the EM program is to actively bring men and boys into the prevention work. Strong proposals will include a clear call to action as to how men and boys can become active allies in the prevention of violence against women and girls. Next, I'm going to discuss the required partnerships. Applicants and partners are limited to meeting or fulfilling only one partnership category or role. This means that every applicant must have at least one partner as outlined in the solicitation for the specific purpose area addressed in the project. Applications that fail to include the required partnerships will be removed from the review process. The required partners for the Engaging Men program and for all 3 purpose areas are a victim service provider, if not the applicant, and an organization or program with demonstrated experience providing support, enrichment, or leadership development programming for men or boys, if not the applicant. 2 examples of what the required partnerships may look like are, first, a victim service provider submitted an application to develop a program for men in the immigrant community to become leaders in their neighborhoods by teaching young boys bystander intervention skills. Since the applicant is a victim service provider, the required partner for this project will be a culturally specific or population-specific community-based organization that provides support, enrichment, or leadership development programming for men or boys. The community-based organization is not a victim service provider, but they possess the expertise and access necessary for the victim service provider to engage with the men and boys in the immigrant community that will be participating in the project. The second example is a community-based organization that provides a fatherhood program for men in the community. The proposed project will integrate training and education on domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, stalking, and sex trafficking into the existing program to empower men to be allies in preventing violence against women. Because the community-based organization does not have the same expertise that a victim service provider would have related to the previously mentioned crimes, they must partner with a victim service provider. For the full definition of a victim service provider, please refer to page 11 of the solicitation. To qualify as a victim service provider, the victim service provider must provide direct victim services to victims of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, stalking, or sex trafficking. These services must be one of the primary purposes for which the organization exists. Examples of direct victim services include victim advocacy, medical and court accompaniment, short or long-term counseling specifically focused on the previously mentioned crimes, or maintaining a hotline for one of the previously mentioned crimes. Examples of victim service providers are domestic violence shelters, rape crisis centers, child advocacy centers, and family justice centers. Before moving to the next section, I want to discuss the importance of partnerships. First, one of the requirements of the EM program is the development of a coordinated community response, also known as a CCR. Because of this, applicants are encouraged to have more than the required partnerships that I just went over. Second, other than the victim service provider, it is not a requirement of this program that the applicant or the partners have experience or expertise in working with victims of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, stalking, or sex trafficking. This is why a victim service provider is a required partner for each purpose area if they are not the applicant. Each of the partners should bring the specific skills and knowledge necessary to support the overall successful development and implementation of the proposed project. When determining who to partner with, applicants should take into consideration the purpose area and the priority areas that will be the focus of the proposed project, the culturally specific and underserved populations that will be engaged as part of the project, and the various professionals required to be trained. You want to establish a strong CCR to successfully implement and support the overall success of the proposed project. Next, I'm going to review some of the mandatory requirements for all applications. Applicants that receive funding under the Engaging Men program are required to engage in and provide certain activities throughout the award period. I'm not going to go over all of them, but just highlight a few. And the full list of the mandatory program requirements is on pages 9 and 10 of the solicitation. Please read these carefully and make sure your proposed project includes each of the mandatory requirements. Failure to address each of the mandatory requirements in the project narrative may result in a deduction of points during the peer review and/or programmatic review process. Grantees are required to participate in OVW-sponsored training and technical assistance, including the new grantee orientation. All grantees must participate in the technical assistance events and activities organized and supported by the Engaging Men program designated technical assistance providers. This includes, but is not limited to, monthly and/or quarterly conference and telephone calls, site visits, in-person training institutes, peer-to-peer learning opportunities, and web-based trainings. Applicants are also required to set aside $30,000 to $35,000 of their total budgets for these requirements. I will go over this in more detail in the budget section. Next, applicants must create or expand a coordinated community response team to develop and guide the proposed project. The CCR must meet regularly and be representative of the community to be served through the project. All projects must provide crisis intervention for participants at all educational, outreach, and training events. The person that provides the crisis intervention must not be the facilitator. This person must be available to participants if they are triggered or wish to speak with someone during the event, not just after the event. The person providing the service must be trained in crisis intervention per the organization or state licensing or training requirements. All projects must cross-train project staff, project partners, and CCR team members. This means that victim service providers will be providing training and education on the VAWA crimes and the impact on survivors to other members of the project and vice versa. Community organizations and our other programs will be providing training and education to the victim service providers on working and engaging with men and boys. All funded projects have an initial planning phase prior to implementing the full scope of the proposed project. The planning phase is approximately 6 months for new grantees and 3 months for continuation grantees. During the planning phase, grantees will be conducting a limited community needs and strengths assessment specific to the proposed project and design a strategic plan for implementation of the project. Before moving to the next section, it is important to note that all of the activities listed on page 9 are required. However, applicants may and are encouraged to add additional activities beyond what is required, so long as they are within the scope of the program and are an allowable activity. Next, we're going to talk about some of the application information. Please refer to the solicitation beginning on page 11 for specific information related to the content and form of the application submission. All applications must include the following 3 components: a proposal narrative, a budget detail worksheet and narrative, and a memorandum of understanding. Applications that do not include these 3 components will be considered substantially incomplete and will not be considered for funding. Each of these components is also scored during peer review. The proposal narrative consists of 3 sections: purpose of proposal, what will be done, and who will implement. All combined, the proposal narrative is worth a total of 60 points and is the bulk of the application. This is where applicants provide detailed information related to the proposed project. Before I get into each section of the proposal narrative, it is important to discuss the page limit. It is imperative that you are mindful of the formatting, so please refer to page 11 for those specifics and the number of allowable pages. Peer reviewers are instructed to stop reading and scoring this section at the page number cutoff. You do not want to lose valuable points due to going over the page limit or not following the formatting requirements. Each year, I've seen excellent applications fall below the funding cutoff score for not adhering to the format requirements. With that said, the project narrative should be no more than 15 pages, double-spaced. The type should be no smaller than 12 point, and you should use Times New Roman or Arial font and include page numbers. The first section that we're going to go over is the purpose of the proposal, which is worth 10 points. This section describes the need for the project and helps reviewers understand your community. Common mistakes include providing too much information that is not relevant to the proposed project, or not enough information to be responsive to what is being asked. Follow the guidance on page 13 of the solicitation to ensure you are providing the required information. Also, keep in mind this section counts towards the page limit. You want to be sure you're being responsive to the questions in this section while at the same time ensuring you have enough pages remaining to provide the detailed information on the proposed project. I've seen applications where the applicant used more pages to describe the need for the project than the number of pages to describe the project activities to address the problem. Strong applications strike a balance between justifying the need and providing detailed information on how the need will be addressed. Next is what will be done. This section is worth 40 points. This is the section where you will describe what you are going to do with your grant funds. You should provide detailed information that clearly describes the activities and strategies to support your proposed project. The goals and objectives should be clear and detailed so reviewers understand how the proposed activities meet the needs identified and the program requirements. For example, there is a difference between stating, "We will train men," and "We will train 15 men to serve as trainers in bystander intervention for the boys at the local community youth center." In addition to the 11 items that must be addressed in this section, each purpose area also has specific criteria that also needs to be addressed. Be certain to include the information requested for the specific purpose area or areas and the priority area or areas that your application will be addressing in the proposed project as identified on the data requested with application survey. Some common mistakes to avoid in this section are not providing a description of products to be developed or purchased with grant funds. If products such as brochures, videos, billboards, or curriculums are mentioned in this section, there should be a line item for them included in the budget and vice versa. Another common mistake is not describing how the products and/or services will be tailored to meet the needs of a specific population to be served, such as age groups, culturally specific, population specific, or the different types of audiences for training and education. Another common mistake is not including activities and strategies that will be developed and implemented to meet the OVW priority area that the applicant has identified on the data requested with application survey. Remember, priority areas are optional and no points are deducted for not addressing a priority area. However, points are deducted if a priority area is identified and there is no supporting activities provided in the What Will Be Done section. And a final common mistake is for continuation applications, not providing details on how the newly proposed project expands or enhances the current or last project. The last part of the proposal narrative is the who will implement, which is worth 10 points. In this section, the applicant should identify whom the key individuals and organizations that will be involved in the proposed project. This section must demonstrate that the individuals and organizations identified have the capacity to address the stated need and can successfully implement the proposed project activities. As a friendly reminder, this section is also part of the page limit. You want to keep this section focused on who is involved in the major project activities and who is most responsible for ensuring the goals and objectives of the proposed project are met. You can refer to page 14 to ensure that you include all of the required information for this section. Next, we're going to talk about the budget detail and the budget detail worksheet and the budget narrative, which is worth 20 points. During the peer review process, the peer reviewers will be reviewing and scoring the budgets to ensure they meet the program requirements and do not include any unallowable activities and/or expenses. It is the applicant's responsibility to read this section thoroughly in order to submit a proper budget. Pages 14 through 18 provide detailed information on how to develop and submit your budget for your proposed project. Applicants will complete a web-based form in JustGrants for the budget worksheet and budget narrative this year. Next, let's go over some of the budget requirements specific to the Engaging Men program. All applicants must include funds specifically for OVW mandated technical assistance and travel. The Engaging Men program has a dedicated team of technical assistance providers specifically for providing comprehensive technical assistance and training for the Engaging Men grantees. All Engaging Men grantees are required to attend and participate in the technical assistance events. Projects located in the lower U.S. must allocate $30,000, and projects located in the U.S. territories, Hawaii, or Alaska must allocate $35,000. Applicants should plan to send at least 4 individuals involved in their project to 3 OVW mandated technical assistance training events each year of the award for a total of 9 training events. In addition to the training events, grantees are required to send a minimum of 3 individuals to the new grantee orientation. This funding may not be used for any other travel or training, and any remaining funds in this section will be returned to OVW at the end of the award period. If applicants are interested in attending conferences or other trainings to increase their team's skills and knowledge, or reimburse for local travel, additional funding outside of the $30,000 to $35,000 should be set aside for those specific purposes. The budget should also include funds to ensure project activities and materials are accessible to individuals with disabilities. For example, videos can be closed captioned and translated into other languages. Written materials can be translated into different languages. Interpreters can be made available at events for those who are deaf, hard of hearing, or speak a language other than English. Next, the budget should include funds to compensate all project partners for their contribution to the project, including attendance at the Engaging Men technical assistance events. The exception to this is if a project partner is a state, local, tribal, or territorial agency and the activities they would be responsible for in the project or within their regular scope of work. An example of this would be a program manager at the Department of Parks and Recreation who runs an after-school program for youth. Because this is within the normal scope of work of the project manager and the Department of Parks and Recreation, this grant could not compensate them for that activity. However, you could designate grant funds to compensate them for mileage to and from the CCR team meetings, travel costs associated with attending the OVW mandated technical assistance trainings and events, and participating in after-hour activities. Next, I want to highlight spending limits on media buys. No more than 10% of the total funding may be used for media buys such as billboards, radio, TV, public service announcements, or bus and subway advertisements. In some circumstances, the budget is reviewed independently of the full application. Therefore, it is important that the budget narrative be as comprehensive as possible and describe in detail each line item in the budget. A strong budget and budget narrative should provide enough information to understand the proposed project without having to refer back to the project narrative. More information on the budget will be provided at the end of this presentation. Next, we're going to talk about the Memorandum of Understanding, otherwise known as the MOU, which is worth 20 points. Page 18 provides detailed information on what is required to be included in the MOU. I encourage you to review this carefully when creating your MOU to ensure you are meeting all of the requirements. In the past, I have seen applications miss the cutoff score by a point because information was missing from the MOU. I'm not going to go over everything that must be included in the MOU. Instead, I'm going to provide you with some examples of common mistakes and some helpful hints. Some common mistakes that have resulted in point deductions in years past are submitting multiple MOUs. The MOU for this program must be one document. You can have multiple signature pages so long as all of the names and titles of everyone signing the MOU are included on each signature page. There should not be separate MOUs for each of your partners. It should be one MOU for all of your partners for all of the project activities with a multiple signature page. Another common mistake is not addressing each of the requirements in the MOU. Like the budget, the MOU may be reviewed separately from the full application, so it is important to include all of the requested information, even if you have addressed it elsewhere in the application. Another common mistake is missing signatures, especially the signatures of the required partners. Every person or organization that is listed in the MOU must also sign the MOU. And one of the biggest common mistakes that we see with the MOUs is submitting an outdated or irrelevant MOU. The MOU must be current, it must be responsive to the solicitation requirements, and include only those activities that are listed in the proposal narrative. For this program, the MOU is often a new document drafted specifically for the proposed project by the applicant in coordination with the proposed project partners. Next, I'm going to go over some activities that compromise victim safety and recovery. OVW does not fund activities that jeopardize victim safety, deter or prevent physical or emotional healing for victims, or allow offenders to escape responsibility for their actions. The Solicitation Companion Guide contains a list of these activities. You can find the Solicitation Companion Guide on the OVW website under Resources for Applicants. I'm not going to review the list verbatim. Instead, to assist you with submitting a strong application, I'm going to go over some of the ones that have caused past applicants to receive point deductions during peer review. The first is project designs and budgets that fail to account for the access needs of individuals with disabilities, with limited English proficiency, or who are deaf or hard of hearing. Peer reviewers usually deduct points off the budget and budget narrative for applications that do not designate funding for how applicants will make their services or products accessible to individuals with disabilities. Please give this serious consideration when completing your application. If you will not need to allocate funds to address this requirement because there is another organization or program in your community that provides this service, it is important for you to state that in the project narrative as well as in the budget and budget narrative. Another mistake that we see is failing to mention that you already have or will be developing policies regarding confidentiality, parental involvement and consent, mandatory reporting, information sharing, and background checks. This is another one that peer reviewers routinely deduct points for during the peer review process. Having these policies in place not only protects the safety of the victim, but also enhances the working relationship between service providers. Do not assume peer reviewers will know that these policies exist because you are a victim service provider. They are looking for proof that they do exist or will be developed, and the only way for them to know this is if they read it in your project narrative. Another common mistake that we see is failing to provide information about crisis intervention support during project activities and outreach events. Next, we're going to discuss out-of-scope activities and unallowable activities. OVW and the Engaging Men program have specific out-of-scope activities that cannot be supported with grant funds. To assist with submitting a strong application, I'm going to go over some of the ones that have caused past applicants to receive point deductions during the peer review process. Please review the full list of out-of-scope activities on page 7 of the solicitation prior to writing your application to ensure you do not include any of the listed activities in your project. The first is number 2, direct victim services. This specific grant program is a prevention-based program. It does not allow for the delivery of victim services. If you're interested in providing direct victim services, you should consider applying for the Children and Youth program instead. The next is number 4, perpetrator services. Grant funds may not be used to provide support services for perpetrators of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, stalking, or sex trafficking, such as counseling, batterer intervention, or anger management. The next is number 5, sexual harassment, bullying, and hazing. Grant funds may not be used to develop or provide training, products, or policies that focus primarily on sexual harassment, bullying, or hazing. OVW recognizes that these issues are serious and can be traumatic experiences. OVW also understands the intersection of the VAWA crimes and sexual harassment, bullying, and hazing. However, OVW grant funds must be used to address domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, stalking, and sex trafficking. To avoid possible point deductions, applicants should refrain from including activities and/or strategies that address sexual harassment, bullying, and hazing without addressing the intersection of those issues to the VAWA crimes. Next is number 7, ceremonies, celebrations, and entertainment. Grant funds may not be used to support award ceremonies or other celebratory events, or the purchase of tickets for entertainment activities such as sporting events, movies, concerts, or museums. For example, grant funds may not be used to fund a graduation celebration for the participants of an 8-week mentoring program. Another example is grant funds may not be used to pay for the transportation and lunches for a group of boys to visit a local art center. Next is number 8, which covers athletics. Grant funds may not be used to pay the salaries for coaches. Grant funds may be used to support a portion of a coach's salary specific to the time spent on project activities. For example, coaches may receive training to prevent sexual assault or dating violence on the team or by team members. This could be supported with grant funds. Another example is a coach may provide prevention education to the team members. The time spent delivering this education to the team members could be supported with grant funds. Grant funds may not be used to support an individual's participation on an athletic team or event. Grant funds may not be used to buy uniforms or pay for transportation to and from games. However, grant funds may be used to transport a team to a prevention education training. Number 9, technical assistance. Grant funds may not be used for the provision of technical assistance to other entities. This includes your project partners. The distinction here is that the engagement program requires grantees to engage in cross-teaming activities where the grantee, project partners, and member organizations of the larger coordinated community response are providing training to one another. It is best to refrain from using the term technical assistance when referencing this training in the project narrative and budget, and instead refer to it as training or education. Number 11, the service area. Grant funds may not be used to conduct or support regional or statewide activities. All applicants must ensure that proposed projects support community-specific and strategies only. In the past, there have been applications removed from further review because the proposed project was a statewide or national initiative. To avoid having this happen to your application, please ensure your project is focused to a specific community. Some examples of activities that are not community-based and could result in point deductions include national or statewide podcasts, organizing or presenting at regional, statewide, or national conferences, and educational or awareness campaigns that have been developed for regional, statewide, or national distribution. Next, I'm going to go over some tips that may improve your chances on becoming an EM grant recipient. The following list is not a guarantee your project will be funded, but is intended to assist you with submitting a strong and responsive application. The first is to think of your application like a blueprint, a complete plan that explains how to do or develop something. Before a contractor can break ground on a new project, they must submit their blueprint to the local officials for review and approval. Your application is very similar to this in that it contains all of the elements necessary to successfully receive permission, otherwise known as funding, to begin the project, as well as the steps necessary to successfully execute and complete your project. So be as detailed and succinct as possible when writing your application. Next is read the solicitation. I've not reviewed every section of the solicitation, so please read all of it. As I've mentioned previously, it is the applicant's responsibility to read the solicitation in its entirety. Everything that needs to be included in or with your application is mentioned in the solicitation, including the supporting resources that are linked or referenced throughout the solicitation. For an application to be considered complete and move to the review process, it must include the following 3 components: a proposal narrative, a budget worksheet and budget narrative, and a memorandum of understanding. MOUs that do not contain signatures may receive point deductions or may cause the application to be removed from further consideration. Be sure that your project strategies and activities address the areas you have identified on the data requested with application survey, otherwise known as the DRA. It is okay for projects to focus on one crime, such as sex trafficking or dating violence. It does not increase your chances of being awarded a grant by stating that you will address every crime if your proposal narrative only provides information on how you will address sexual assault. A strong application is focused on the crimes, population, and purpose area or areas, and the priority area or areas that are stated in the DRA. If you are submitting a continuation application, be sure that your project is building upon what you have already accomplished with the last award. A continuation project should not simply be a continuation of the same activities. You must be able to demonstrate growth or expansion, or be able to articulate well the reason or reasons why you are proposing the same activities. Use the application checklist on page 25 of the solicitation. This checklist will help ensure all required documents are included in your application when you begin the process of submitting. Allow plenty of time to gather the required information, especially the signatures on the MOU. Remember, for the MOU, you may have multiple signature pages, so long as every individual signing the MOU is listed on each signature page. This usually speeds the process, as you do not have to wait for one signature before acquiring the next. To avoid any possibility of missing the submission deadline, submit your application as far in advance of the deadline as possible. Technical issues may arise, and the number of individuals seeking assistance from grants.gov and JustGrants increases on and near the submission date. Make the application easy to read and follow for all of the reviewers. Use the heading and subheading titles that are in the solicitation for each section. Be sure the application and responses to the program requirements and expectations are complete and clearly written. Avoid using acronyms. Remember, the reviewers are not familiar with your community and may not be familiar with the acronyms your organization and project partners may use. Print out the application before submitting it to ensure appropriate formatting and adherence to the page limit requirements. Also, number your pages in your application. And last, if your name and contact information is listed as the point of contact, please monitor your email inbox, including your spam folder. There are times that the system may reject your application, and you will need to make sure that you are getting those alerts. Next, we're going to discuss technical challenges in late submissions. As I mentioned at the beginning of this session, the process of submitting an application involves multiple steps and multiple systems. I cannot stress strong enough the importance of allowing yourself significant time to register, prepare, and submit your application. Pages 21 and 22 contain important information to request a late submission should you experience technical challenges. Please read this information carefully. Applicants who experience technical issues should continue to develop their proposals while they are working to resolve any issues. This will enable applicants to submit a full proposal by the deadline using an alternate method if necessary and approved. In the next couple of slides, we're going to focus on aspects of your application that relate to the documents our financial team, the Grants Financial Management Division, otherwise known as GFMD, reviews. More specifically, we'll discuss some items GFMD has identified from prior year's applications that can help with expediting their review process. As with other sections of the solicitation, I'm going to highlight certain aspects of the pre-award risk assessment and provide you with a link to a detailed webinar on how to provide the budget that will be included in your application. First, we'll highlight the items identified in the Data Requested with Application survey, also known as the DRA, which is completed by all applicants in JustGrants. A list of questions included in the DRA appears at the end of the solicitation under the heading Survey Questions. Applicants should click on the survey name and the pre-award risk assessment to access and complete the surveys in JustGrants. Specifically, two items that GFMD would like for me to discuss with you are the single audit response and the IRS three-step safe harbor procedure, both questions on the DRA survey. OVW requires all applicants provide a statement as to whether they have expended $750,000 or more in federal funds during their last fiscal year. If they have, then they indicate that and also specify the end date of their last fiscal year. However, GFMD is finding that applicants do not always include all of this information. Please ensure this question is answered in its entirety on the DRA survey, which is also question number 3. The next item to highlight from the solicitation is specifically for nonprofit organizations. If the applicant is a nonprofit and you use the IRS three-step safe harbor procedure to determine your executive's compensation, you are required to provide a disclosure letter. Page 17 of the solicitation provides the details and a link to a sample letter. Note that there are 4 required parts of this disclosure letter. The sample letter provided outlines all 4 parts of the disclosure, so please be sure to follow the sample and provide a response to each of the 4 parts. The next item is the pre-award risk assessment survey, which assists GFMD during the pre-award risk assessment review for all applications. Each applicant must prepare a response to all 11 questions, and each question has multiple parts. GFMD has noticed from prior years that applicants do not always fully answer all parts of the questions, which in turn requires GFMD to reach out to the applicant and may delay funding decisions. Some of the most common issues encountered have been, for example, question number 2, where the applicant indicates that they do indeed have internal policies, but they don't provide a brief list of topics covered in the policies and procedures. On question number 3, some applicants fail to provide a brief summary of the organization's process for tracking expenditures, and more specifically, whether or not it tracks budgeted versus actual expenditures. These are just a few examples, but in general, please make sure you read each piece of each question and provide a full and comprehensive response. This next slide highlights some of the many resources that are available to assist applicants with completing and submitting an application. These resources should be used as you are creating the budget to be submitted with your application. GFMD has developed a detailed webinar to assist applicants in developing the budget for their OVW grant applications. This webinar provides some insight as to what OVW financial staff considers during their review of your budget. The webinar can be found under the budget information section on the OVW website under resources. Next up is the uniform guidance, which can be found at 2 CFR 200. Another excellent resource is the DOJ financial guide, as well as the budget section of the Engaging Men solicitation. If you need assistance finding these resources, please contact the GFMD help desk. So with that, we are finally at the end of this presentation. We know this is a lot of information to process. If you have questions related to the solicitation that were not addressed in this session, please reach out to one of the following. If you have questions regarding the Engaging Men program, they should be directed to the CYEM unit. This includes mandatory requirements, OVW priority areas, allowable activities, and late submission requests. The email to reach the CYEM unit is ovw.consulyouth@usdoj.gov. For questions about information provided by the Grants Financial Management Division, this includes the pre-award risk assessment, budget format, and required financial related documents, you can call them at 888-514-8556 or send an email to ovw.gfmd@usdoj.gov. Questions related to technical issues with JustGrants can be forwarded to the email, which is support@grant.gov, or you can call them at 800-518-4726. And if you have issues with JustGrants, you can reach out to the OVW JustGrants support by calling 866-655-4482 or sending an email to ovw.justgrantsupport@usdoj.gov. Please note that OVW staff cannot comment on the quality of an applicant's proposed project or proposed activities. Thank you so much for your time today, and thank you for your interest in the OVW Engaging Men and Boys program.